fights me tooth and nail to get up to the bath, and now she's having like a time of her life.
Hey, what's up, Facebook? What's up, fellas? Welcome to Man Up Friday with me, Mike, your mentor. Hope you guys had a good week. We got some good stuff tonight as we wrap up this section. If you're watching the replay, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you guys coming along on this journey with me as we dive into these important topics, right? If you're new to this page, welcome. This has been a journey into manhood from all angles, and that's a very important journey because if you look outside your window, if you're like anybody else, you notice that there's a lot of problems out there, and it's my opinion that those problems are a direct reflection of the irresponsibility that men have taken on, or the lack of responsibility men have not accepted in their roles in their marriage, in their roles in their family, in their roles in their community. And this page came about kind of a culmination of a lot of things in my life, but one of the main things is growing up without a father and having to figure out what it meant to be a man on my own, what that looked like, and how to walk that out, right? Because if you ask 10 different men when they knew they became a man, you're going to get 10 different answers, which is pretty crazy. Especially in Western society, there's no formal rite of passage to help men determine when they're a man, right? There's no marker that says you are definitively a man, you have done these things. And because of that, a lot of men cause a lot of destruction and a lot of hurt on their way to figure that out for themselves and what that looks like, especially as society gets more away from traditional family values and men are less prevalent in the household as the divorce rate increases and the number of homes increase with absentee fathers. So all this stuff that I talk about on Friday nights comes from a workbook that changed my life, and it's this workbook right here, The Quest for Authentic Manhood by Robert M. Lewis, or Dr. Robert M. Lewis. And this was a complete game changer for me. I was at a point in my life where we had just moved to Chicago pretty much without telling anybody because of some stuff that I had did in my past and revealed to my wife. And I had a choice to make. Was I going to run and hide from my mistakes, or was I going to own them and follow my wife and take responsibility for what I did, no matter what that looked like or what the possible outcome could be? And I found myself in Chicago, not sure I wanted to be married, not sure who I was. I was lost, and I needed some help. And this came into my life at an appropriate time. And you don't know what you don't know. And as I went through this workbook with some guys, it started unlocking things from my past that had so far kept me from growing as a man and discovering what that really looks like. So every Friday we go through this, and that's what that looks like. So welcome and thanks for joining me here as we do that. So I'm gonna share my screen, and we're gonna jump right into tonight's content. All right, sorry about that. Okay, hold that out. All right, so here we go. We got the Wounded Heart Part 3, and I think this picture is appropriate, right? Because it shows, it's a representation. I think all of us can relate to this in some way or another, where we get in trouble or something happens to us, and that situation leaves a mark on our lives. You know, and I think about this kid, and he's wearing the dunce hat, and you know, for the rest of his life, if he doesn't choose to do something about it, he's going to have that label on him as a dunce. And there's a lot of labels that we all carry in our lives until we're ready to face them and deal with them. You know, I can remember a time when I was in elementary school, and I didn't know how to deal with my dad not being in my life, and I would go to school and I would just have these emotional outbursts, and I would run outside and I would scream at the top of my lungs and I would cry, and all the kids would put their faces on the glass and stare at me and probably in their mind wonder what the heck is going on with him. And I would come in, and I remember this one kid calling me Psycho Michael one time, and that just kind of stuck with me for a little bit. About started to take on this personality of kind of being crazy, and you don't want to mess with me because I'm crazy, and this persona, right? And that was something that I had to deal with at that time. But it's a good representation of these identities, that these labels that we take on, and we got to be very, very careful how we steward those and how we go about getting to the root of those things, and then moving past them. So jump in. Quick review from last week. A second look at this wound. So there's an honest confession that comes when you dive into the wounded heart, and that's it's hard to discuss, and it's even harder to face. The first step is being willing to be real with yourself, to stop lying, like we talk about on this channel all the time. Stop lying to yourself about how you feel, what you want, that things are okay when they're not, and when you feel that they're not, and then facing those things, right? Choosing to make a decision to not be held back by those things, to not be weighed down by those things. And that's way easier said than done, but I firmly believe that we all have it within us. We all have the courage to do it, and once we start to take that step out, things will become easier as we face those things head on. And that doesn't mean there's not going to be tears. That doesn't mean there's not going to be pain. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be discomfort. But I promise you this: on the other side of all that is tremendous freedom. Freedom like you have never known before. To get past those things from your past that have wounded you, and to drop those bags off and to say, I'm done with it. I'm not carrying it anymore. I'm not taking it forward. And it's freeing, and it's like a giant rises up inside of you, and you can fully become the person that you were made to become. So quick definition again of the wounded heart. We are all fallen and flawed creatures at odds with our Creator and each other. Ephesians 2:3. Among them we too all formerly lived in the lust of our flesh, indulging the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, even as the rest. In Romans 3:10-12, as it is written, there is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks God. All have turned away. They have turned together, become worthless. There is no one who does good, not even one. It just kind of speaks to what's going on in our hearts, in our humanity, and our bent, our disposition towards wanting to do unbecoming things, right? Especially as men. And I can attest to this, right? I find myself wanting to, right? Let's just be real. I find myself wanting to look at things that I probably shouldn't look at. I find myself wanting to buck responsibility. I find myself wanting to tell half truths. I find myself wanting to exaggerate and cover up my mistakes. You know, all these things that really we do as kids, but we do as adults even more. So there's that. All right, so let's talk about tonight's content, right? So the first thing, the pain that flows from this wound. First, we are born separated from God. 2, we are born or we are bound to a life of futility. 3, we are enslaved to a corrupt nature. And then 4, we are all bent to do evil. And these 4 things, right, they speak about the depravity that's inside all of our hearts. And we'll get into that here now. The implications of this heart wound called depravity. Depravity means we are all dysfunctional by nature. I don't care who you are, you have some sort of dysfunction. Whether it's nurture or nature, you can't go through life without having some, because we live in a crazy world. We live in a world of hurt people, and hurt people regardless. Even though I've addressed a lot of the wounds in my past and in my heart, not only did I hurt a lot of people on the way to the point that I'm at now, but or before I dealt with those things, but I still hurt people all the time. I mean, I hurt my wife's feelings yesterday when we had to be somewhere, and I was late, and my wife had to remind me, that it wasn't just about being late. It was about having respect for what she asked me to do. And at first I wanted to be angry, and I wanted to not accept that responsibility and say, "Oh, you just don't understand. I was doing a good thing." But the more I thought about it, the more God kind of tugged at my heart and said, you need to think about what she's really saying to you about respecting her time and respecting what she asked you, and what that really communicates to her. Right? Is she heard? Is she valued? Is she loved? And in that moment, I didn't, and I had to ask for forgiveness and apologize to my wife. 2, depravity means most of my real problems are in me and not out there. And I can't tell you how true that this is. The majority of the problems that we find ourselves in, that we create, come from within inside us, and the desires that we have that are healthy and unhealthy, and are not a result of the world and people holding us back and people doing this to us, and maybe being born in a certain environment, being having to go through certain trials in life. Right? We were made to overcome. We have a choice on how we are going to approach life. We are going to either affect life, or we are going to let life affect us. So I would choose to affect life rather than my life or my circumstances affect me. And I hope that you will take those same empowering steps and move forward in power in your own life, and take responsibility for wherever you're at, whatever you're dealing with, and what that looks like. With a little bit of effort, a little bit of wise counsel, and a little bit of patience, I believe that we can all change our course in life. Genesis 3:9-13. But the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you?" He answered, "I have heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." And he said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" The man said, "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate it." And what this passage from the Bible is depicting is the lack of responsibility that the first 2 people God created that refused, or the lack of responsibility they refused to take. Right? They blamed each other, or I'm sorry, the man blamed the woman, and the woman blamed the serpent, rather than accepting their own responsibility. And this is just a good example of the way that we live our lives, right? Where we refuse to accept responsibility and we want to put the blame on something else or someone else. 3. Depravity cannot be eradicated by education, a better environment, self-understanding, or willpower. We must be saved from our depravity. John 3:7 says, "Do not marvel that I said to you, you must be born again." And that's not how you spell that for all of you grammar people out there. Depravity can wear all kinds of sophisticated masks to hide itself, and how many of these can you relate to? The education mask, right? I have my PhD, or I have such and such degree, or such and such credentials, after my name. I mean, we all do it, right, in some way or some form. The personality mask. I'm gonna be super. What is the word? I can't think of the words. I'm gonna be super outgoing, right, and be the life of the party, and I'm gonna do that because that means then I don't have to deal with what's inside of me, and maybe how I'm feeling or how I'm acting. I can entertain everybody else, so I can stay busy, and not have to do the real soul searching. Or maybe you're an introvert, and you hide from people because of some wounds in your past, and wanting to get out there and to meet people, and to interact with people. The rule keeping mask. You got to make sure that everyone is following all directions, everyone is doing everything by the book. Really at the heart of that is control, right? You need to be in control, because when you're not in control, there's something there, right? And usually that's an issue of trust. The religious mask, I'm holier than thou. I'm doing what I'm supposed to, therefore I'm better than you. And I know I've been guilty of that myself, and I've had to be checked by my wife, be checked by other people. So I tread very cautiously and very cautiously, and I approach this out of a heart and a spirit of honor when I'm sharing these things with you guys, because I never want to come across as that. I want to present this stuff to you because it changed my life, and I hope that my prayer is that your heart is open and your mind is open, and that this will speak to you on whatever way that it needs to. Matthew 23:25 and 27. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like the whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. Right? And here this passage is Jesus, he's condemning these teachers of the law, these religious scholars, the people who are supposedly at the upper echelon of society, because you know what? They put on this front of they had it all together. They they knew what to do. They wore these masks, right? They hid behind these things, and they refused to address what was really going on in their heart. The greed and the self-indulgence, and obviously other things, but that's the two that Jesus called out. And it's just it's a warning, right, to not be like these people. Don't be fake. Don't put on appearances. Deal with the stuff that is going on inside of you. It just comes back to the thing we talk about all the time. Stop lying to yourself about how you feel, and stop lying to other people, right? Get real. When you get real, you start to heal. You start to grow, and then great things come from that. Number 5, depravity means we must not trust ourselves alone. Proverbs 14:12. I love this verse. There is a way that appears to be right, but in the end, it leads to death. That's also why it's important to have mentors, right? To catch your blind spots as you're going down that road that you think appears to be right. 6, admitting my depravity is the first step in finding a real relationship with God. Matthew 5:3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. 7, progress in authentic manhood will parallel my growing understanding of the depth and extent of my depravity. 1 Timothy 1:15, here is a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptance. Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am the worst. Alright, so let's talk about how this specifically applies to men. 1, depravity means men have a natural tendency to avoid domestic responsibility. I don't know what your house is like if you're married. I don't know how you handle that if you just work and you expect your wife to clean the house and to take care of the kids. My encouragement in that would be 1, communication about that. But 2, even more than that, right? Why is there your expectations and her expectations? Love your wife, honor her, help her out around the house. We talked the other day about having false expectations, right? Or misplaced expectations. I'm not a marriage counselor. I've been married 12 years. A lot of them really hard years because of the stupidity that I partook upon. But one thing I've learned is that I don't care who you are. When someone helps you out with something, you're appreciative of that. So guys, get off your butt, help your wife out. Yeah, do a good work. 2, depravity means men have a tendency to rule hardly over women and children. And this goes back to what we talked about in one of the first weeks, right, where we had the 4 faces of manhood, and where, because of our natural selfishness and need for indulgence, we tend to skew towards the tyrant face. If we don't purposely slow down and think about what we're doing, right? We all can work all day. We can come home. The house can be dirty. The kids can be screaming and running around, and we can catch very short fuse and blow up and say things we shouldn't say, and treat the ones that we love the most in ways that we wouldn't even treat a stranger. So let's exercise some patience, fellas. Let's exercise some loving kindness and some understanding. Genesis 3:16, to the woman he said, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Ephesians 6:4, fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Number 3, depravity means men tend to get lost in their careers and personal pursuits and ignore God's great purpose for their lives, right? There's nothing wrong with pursuing a career. There's nothing wrong with your own personal pursuits. But you need to be mindful if those are distracting you from your true purpose in life, and finding that true purpose and growing in that true purpose, whatever it is that God may have for you. Alright, last thing, and we'll call it a night. Little context for this verse, right? So King Solomon was the wisest man ever on earth, and as a result he was also the richest man ever on earth. There was this infographic, man, and I should have found that, but they estimated all the people throughout history, like the greatest fortunes of all time, and they estimated I want to say King Solomon's net worth at almost $1 trillion on this infograph that I saw in today's world. So basically, the dude could have whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. And this is what he said: I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. So here's a guy who had everything that a person could ever want and more. Nothing was off limits for him. And he said nothing was gained under the sun. Everything was meaningless. All those meaningless pursuits, all those meaningless possessions meant nothing, right? Brought him no lasting satisfaction. And I think that's extremely profound. So I just want to leave you with that tonight. That's it. Until next week. I'm not sure. I don't remember what we get into next week, but I know that it will be good. Once again, I appreciate you guys joining in, and I hope that you guys are learning from this stuff. And more than that, I hope you guys are thinking about it and applying it to your lives in whatever way God impresses it upon your hearts. So I love you guys. If you need anything, you can hit me up. I'm here for you. We'll work something out, right? Whether it's just Skyping, whether it's messaging back and forth, whether it's jumping on a phone call, so you can get something off your chest. If I'm not the person for you, hey, that's cool. My encouragement would be for you to have someone in your life that you trust, that you can go to, and you can unload the heavy stuff, right? The stuff that's causing you guilt, the stuff that's causing you shame. Just got to clear that crap out and walk in freedom. And the only way to do that is to bring it to the light and to share it with somebody. So I will see you guys tomorrow for the Saturday shout out. Have a good night.